Welcome to Between Over and Next with your hosts, Holly and Robert, a happily married couple who explore the space between what was, what is, and what's to come. From career changes to navigating life's uncertainties, this dynamic duo will empower you to live your happiest life at every age and stage. So, get ready because your journey with Holly and Robert starts now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Between Over and Next. Hi, Holly.
Hi, Robert.
I am really looking forward to our podcast interview today with Jill Freckman because I always like reminiscing about the start of Wedding Podcast Network. And we were launching Wedding Podcast Network in 2005 at just the precise moment that Jill was launching Fretzels. And so many of the things that she was experiencing, we were experiencing, we were hoping to experience, we were experiencing alongside of her. And it's really going to be fun to talk with her and learn more about her start, her pivot into Fretzels, her pivot out of Fretzels. It's really quite a delicious story.
And if you are considering building a brand, this episode is absolutely for you. Are you an intentional entrepreneur or an accidental entrepreneur? You never know.
I've been both.
That is true. You never know what that spark is going to be. And this episode could be it to bring your vision to reality because you are going to hear an entrepreneurial story that many of you may relate to. Welcome, Jill.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited about this.
We met at an organization called Ladies Who Launch back in 2005. Both Jill and I were launching new businesses at the time. Jill was founding a company called Fretzels, and we were creating Wedding Podcast Network.
Yeah.
Your story is so interesting to me because you started in the advertising world.
I was an art director when I graduated college. I started a job right away. And my very first year, that holiday season, our group had a holiday party. And I made chocolate-covered pretzels for the party. And chocolate-covered pretzels is something that my mom and I have been making it since I was really little. It's one of my favorite things to eat. And there weren't a lot of places to find them back then. And when you did find them, they weren't always so great or fresh. So my mom and I just started making them and made them throughout my life. And then I made them for this office holiday party and everybody just went nuts over them, including my bosses. They were all like, oh my God, you have to sell these. There was no part of me that ever thought I would be an entrepreneur. So I just said, I'm glad you like them, but thanks, but no thanks. And then the following year, I made them again for the office holiday party. And they're like, no, seriously, you have to sell these. And it was probably after that I started playing around with it just for fun on the side as like a little hobby. My background's in design, so I designed a logo. Actually didn't love the name Fretzels, which one of my boss's husbands, he had come up with the name based off of my last name and Pretzels. So Freckman and Pretzels gets Fretzels. So I had the whole team come up with other ideas for the names and we voted and Fretzels by Jill won out. I played around with it on the side just for fun for a couple of years. I still don't think I really thought that I would ever launch it as a real business until I think it was January of 2005. This might sound a little cliche, but there was an episode of Oprah Winfrey Show. They had an author named Poe Bronson, and he had written a book called What Should I Do With My Life? And the stories that he told on the show that are also in the book just really inspired me and ignited this like kernel of encouragement and inspiration. And around the same time, my parents, I remember, came into the city, took me out to lunch one day, and they both were like, what are you doing? You have this great idea. We think it's viable. You're young. You have nothing to lose. Go for it. And with $300 that my grandmother gave me to buy chocolate, I did. I went for it. And I officially launched early in 2005, and I wanted to launch it as an internet-based business. I did not want a brick and mortar. I didn't want to get into stores like most people did at the time. I had seen the internet was just becoming the internet that we know today. And I remember looking at it and thinking, why is no one else doing this? This is amazing. You can have a store that's open 24/7. People can shop in their pajamas at 2:00 in the morning if they want to. And that's how I wanted to start. I always used to tell people I never invented chocolate covered pretzels, but nobody was marketing it as a high-end gourmet gift item. So that's where I found my space.
I'm sure so many people are in that same situation, right? Where they've created something, whether it's a food item or a craft item or something like that, where that moment someone says to you, you know, this is not available to the general public. What was it that was, you think, holding you back at that moment from it being a yes when you look back now in hindsight?
When I was younger, the general consensus is people push you. They want you to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or something like that. And,
Right.
you know, I went through all those phases of thinking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I really pushed the creative side of me away because, again, conventional ideas is you can't make a living as an artist. So I pushed it away, and then it just sort of crept up, and I discovered that there are ways that you can make money as an artist. And the way that I found, I was introduced to advertising design. So getting into advertising was a way to do it. And I went to school at Syracuse, which is well known for their advertising design program. And that's how I started. So the idea of not going the corporate path didn't seem like something that was even a possible idea. And again, I had no clue what to do. I knew nothing about a business. I knew nothing about starting a business, running a business. I certainly knew nothing about the food industry. So when they told me the first time that I should sell it, I'm like, I'm glad you guys like it. And I love making them, but I don't want to make it my living.
It's interesting when you mention your college experience, because I don't think back then there were courses in entrepreneurship, right?
Nowadays, they have whole departments dedicated to entrepreneurship, which I used to, when I had Fretzels, I used to speak at NYU at their entrepreneurship program. When I was going to school, that was not a thing. Nobody taught you that. You know, I wish people taught that in like elementary school.
They are starting.
Right from the
I
start.
think they're starting to do that.
Right.
So
because we had done the high school,
Yeah.
right? We went to both of our children in high school at an entrepreneurship class, and we came in to speak to both of them.
And I think that even in early education, I think they're even introducing it now.
Yeah.
You know, the
It
power
needs
of
to be right from the
invention,
start.
and tapping into that creative side, which you have. And, you know, honestly, the advertising to becoming an entrepreneur, I think you were destined for it, Jill, you know, because having the branding background and the creative background.
It was definitely an advantage that I see nowadays that entrepreneurs don't have. That, you know, I think I took it for granted that my background was in design and I worked in advertising, which is related to marketing and branding. And the fact that I was able to design my own logo and design my own packaging, I kind of knew exactly what I wanted it to look like. I was able to figure out a way to make stock packaging, which back then there was slim to none, make it look like it was custom packaging, because you can't afford custom packaging when you're just starting. So I think I had a huge advantage that I was able to create the branding for my business, which is a huge expense for most entrepreneurs.
So, Jill, here it is. You started Fretzels as a party treat.
Yep.
At an office holiday party. And you grew it into a nationally recognized brand.
Yes.
So share some of your key strategies and challenges that you faced in scaling your business, because you brought it from its very humble beginnings to being available in over 200 retailers, right? Including major ones such as Fresh Market and Nordstrom.
Yes.
So tell us, because that's something anyone in any business needs to know.
Well, I think for me, it was, I just leaned into what I knew and what was available to me. When I started, I was working in advertising at the time, and I had friends who were in the account side of advertising. And so when I very first started, I remember one of my friends gave me a list of all the account people at every magazine that we worked with. I literally just packed up and sent blind samples to everybody on that list. And I ended up getting an order from Oprah Magazine, not to be in the magazine, which I came close to 3 times throughout my pretzels career, but they ordered it for an office holiday party, I think it was. And I did a custom pretzels for it. And then it was featured in their magazine, I think. They didn't say the name of it, but there were photos of it that I could point out. So I realized that's what I had access to.
But there was a very key something that happened in your life, Jill, and it was something that mattered to us too. We wanted to get a mention, tell everybody, and you know what I'm talking about.
I believe you were talking about Daily Candy.
I am.
So Daily Candy, for those who are too young to remember, Daily Candy was like the Oprah Winfrey of the internet. Daily Candy was an online newsletter that everyone and their mom who had some kind of a business wanted to get a feature in, because whatever they touched turned to gold. So you would get, it was Daily Candy about anything. Could be the hot new restaurant, the new clothing store, the new anything. And everybody wanted to get into this online newsletter. They started out, I believe, in New York City, and then they had, you know, LA and Chicago and a whole bunch of different cities across the US. Technically, I launched my website about a month before I was featured. And now, so to rewind a little bit, again, this is something that everyone and their mom back then who had a business wanted to get into. And it was on my list. It was on my bucket list. And I did not reach out to them yet because I was still building to launch. And one day I got an email from an editor there. And she said, "We heard about your product and we'd like to do a feature. Where can you buy it?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the process of building a website, and then you'll be able to buy it from there." And she said, "Great, just let me know when it's live." And I launched the website in, I guess it was probably the end of May, maybe, of 2005. Or maybe it was a little bit earlier. And I emailed her and I said, you know, it's up and running. She's like, "Great, we're going to write a feature. I'll let you know." This feature came out, it was very serendipitously done the Thursday before 4th of July weekend. And that is significant, and I will tell you in a second. But my website had been live a little over a month before this article came out. I had 4 orders online, and probably 3 of them were friends and family. When this article came out, that day alone, I got 100 orders, and they just kept coming. And then the reason why I say it was so great that it was 4th of July weekend is because UPS was closed. So that gave me an extra day because I was not prepared to fulfill that number of orders, because they just kept coming. And that just sort of like grew into the next bit of press, the next bit of press, the next bit of press, because people were seeing it, they were buying it. I think the next large hit that I got was Real Simple magazine. And I got a feature in that. And that one, I believe, was for a holiday edition, because I had a Pretzel of the Month Club subscription product. And so they were doing an article on subscription memberships that you can get as like a gift. So instead of giving just one thing, it's like you give a couple months worth of gifts. And I remember the woman who was writing the article, she had already finished the article when her friend sent her a box of pretzels. She went back and rewrote the article to include pretzels in it. Right. And then, you know, that just, you know, I was in the Today Show a couple times, Rachel Ray. So all these things, I never did my own proactive outreach for press for many years.
So how did you, how'd you get the exposure and being on the shelves and the retailers?
That came much later because like I said, when I started my business, I never wanted to sell to stores. Whereas like nowadays, it's like everyone starts a food business. They're like, I want to get into Whole Foods. Right. But back then I didn't want that. But after the economy tanked in like 2008, 2009, and I lost a good number of my large corporate gift clients, which was my bread and butter, I had to rethink what I was doing. And I had to figure out a way to bring in more consistent revenue throughout the year.
Right.
So I decided to start selling wholesale, which at the time then, because mine was a gift business, my packaging was geared towards gifting. That doesn't work when you're on the shelf at a store, when you're not there to talk about it, or people aren't looking on your website and seeing all the photos and reading what you write about it. So I had to rethink the product offering. I had to rethink the packaging, had to figure out how to get barcodes. I had no idea what I was doing.
There was an evolution.
Yeah, there was an evolution. Yeah. And it was basically, again, just using my own contacts and really just like walking into small stores with samples and talking to people and getting into small places. And Nordstrom, I got that because I reached out. One of my very first jobs was at Nordstrom. And for me, for those who know Nordstrom, I fully believe Nordstrom invented customer service. And that's where I learned good customer service, like above and beyond good customer service. And so I attribute the way I ran my business to that experience working there. So for me, it was like a full circle moment to get my products into Nordstrom. And I think this was shortly after they had opened those like coffee bars at Nordstrom. And I got in touch with somebody and they put me in touch with somebody else. But I got into Nordstrom, which was amazing because, again, total full circle moment for me. I had a friend who sent a gift to someone who happened to work for a distributor, happened to be the distributor that works with the Fresh Market. He got me a meeting with the buyer at the Fresh Market. And then that was my first huge order. I mean, I never knew what a pallet was until I got this order.
Did you ever have any concerns about being able to fulfill the orders at that point? Was production scalable at that point?
So at that point, I mean, I was always afraid that I wasn't going to be able to do it. But my uncle once, when I was young, gave me a piece of advice and he said, say yes and figure it out later. But at the time, I had moved from a commercial kitchen, like incubator, to I was actually looking for someone to completely take over my manufacturing. I did unofficially partner with another chocolate company that was like a 40-year-old business. And so they had a factory on Long Island. And so that's where I produced all of my stuff. So when I got this order, I did have in place the infrastructure to do that, although it did take quite a while and it was a lot of work and I probably didn't sleep for a couple weeks. I had access to machinery that I would never have had access to on my own, which was enabled me to create new products. I don't know if you remember, I had a product called Fractured Pretzels, which was all the broken pretzels that I couldn't use. So I knew that I wanted to create this product very early on because we would have garbage bags full of broken pretzels that the guys that worked for me, I would literally just tell them, take a garbage bag full of pretzels home to your family, like, because I didn't know what to do with them. So I knew I wanted to, but I also knew that I was not going to hand dip a tiny piece of a pretzel. So I knew I needed a machine for that. And it wasn't until I moved to this other factory on Long Island that I had access to machines that could do it. So when I launched that product, I assumed, which my dad always tells me, don't assume anything.
Right.
I thought that people would come onto the website, buy a gift for somebody else, and then throw a bag of the Fractured Pretzels in their cart for themselves. And what ended up happening was that product became more popular than some of the other products. So much so that, one, I had to create a gift package of that product because people were asking for it for the holidays. So I created, a gift box filled with it. And then the other thing was, I remember the first time I had to break a perfectly good pretzel in order to make this product because we didn't have enough broken to keep up with the demand for it.
Well, you're an innovator for sure, Jill. So is Pretzel still exist?
It does not exist.
Okay, so tell us why it doesn't exist.
So I had Fretzels for 12 years And while I was doing my business, I started working with other businesses, including the company that I worked with as my manufacturer. I worked with him when he wanted to expand his business through franchising. So I spent a couple of years working with him building that. I also started doing speaking engagements and working with other entrepreneurs and small businesses to help them build their brands. And I found that I loved building brands, and I love building brands even more than I loved running the day-to-day of my business. And like I said, the food industry is very difficult. The margins are very small. It's a very competitive space. It's hard. And I got to a point also, I was still pretty much a one-woman show. And I got to the point where I had built the business to a point where it was way too big for me to run it the way I had been running it, but not quite big enough to hire all the people and get all the infrastructure in place to get it to the next level. And I never took any outside capital except for the $300 my grandmother gave me to buy chocolate when I started. And at that point, I thought, okay, if I want to get it to the next level, I probably am going to need to take on money. And at that point, I was burnt out. I mean, you talk about nowadays, people are very open about burnout. It's a real thing. Then I didn't really know what it was, but I was exhausted. And I remember thinking, I wouldn't give me money. I knew that I didn't have it in me at that point. So you asked if Fretzl still exists. On paper, it still does, because it's my baby. I couldn't let it go, but I needed to step away from it. So on paper, it's still open in case I ever want to do it again. But yeah, I came to a point where I just couldn't do it. And I tried a number of ways to keep it going without me giving 28 hours a day, 400 days a year.
Your talent in the world of food positioned you.
Yes.
To help other businesses and brands and to educate others. How do you leverage your experiences to guide others when they're building and marketing their brands?
I closed Fretzl's in 2017. And nowadays, when people close businesses, they basically throw a party and tell everybody. Back then, it was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. And I remember calling one of my corporate clients who had been with me since the beginning. And when I told her, she started crying. And then I started crying. And I was like, I can't do this. I basically ghosted the world. I just sort of slowly shut things down. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't make a big deal. And I went into a really dark place. I didn't talk to anyone. I wanted nothing to do with the industry. I was embarrassed about it. I felt like a failure. And then in early 2018, this woman, Catherine, who ran the commercial kitchen where I started Fretzl's, called me and said, I have all of these food entrepreneurs producing products in the kitchen, and we're getting close to market season and trade show season, and none of them know how to market and sell their products. You were always really good at that. Would you come in and do a 2-hour seminar? So I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And when I was talking with her and another woman that she works with back and forth for a couple of weeks, and it went from a 2-hour seminar to a 6-week course. And I thank God every day that Catherine called me, because that was the thing that made me really sit and look at everything I had done over those 12 plus years of building and growing and running Fretzl's. And I realized, oh my God, I did a lot. And I did a lot not having any clue what I was doing. And also I made a ridiculous amount of mistakes. And so even when I had Fretzl's, when I was doing speaking engagements and working with other businesses, I always felt like I had no clue what I was doing, and I didn't have anyone to go to. I mean, I had Ladies Who Launch, which is how I met you, but there weren't resources for people who were starting businesses. And there wasn't anyone for me to go to who had started a food business. So for me, I always felt like I just threw a lot of pasta at the wall. I made a lot of mistakes. Some of them were costly in many ways. And I felt like if I can help someone else skip all the crap and just do the stuff that works, to me, it was worth all the pain and suffering that I dealt with. So being asked to teach other entrepreneurs really made me realize, like, even though I closed my business, it wasn't a failure. I gained so much from that experience, and to be able to help others on their journey, that makes it all worth it for me.
As entrepreneurs, when we move from one thing to the next, people will look at you and says, "Well, why couldn't you make that work? Why did that fail?" It's a stepping stone. It's a building block. It put you where you are today.
I feel we learned so much that we can collectively, the three of us and so many other people that we like, know, and trust, that we can minimize the mistakes and maximize the success. So, Jill, I want you to answer this question. How do you balance that meticulous attention required in branding and marketing with the need for innovative and bold strategies to stand out in today's competitive landscape?
So for me, I think the one of the things that I feel is so important, and I did this with Fretzels, is the customer focus. I have infamously known for telling people, like, nobody cares about your product. They really care about how that product's going to affect their lives and help them and make things better for them. So attention to detail is really important. A lot of people say, well, no one's going to notice if I do that little thing. And they may not consciously understand it at the time that they're experiencing it, but all of those little experiences lead up to the 360-degree brand experience that you're trying to create for customers. And that's really what makes customers want to buy your products and do business with you and tell their friends about it. It's really all the little details that are important.
Yeah.
So to me, treat others as you would like others to treat you. It's the little things. Like when I would get, emails from a customer that, like, was upset because the pretzels were broken and they needed it for a gift. And some people would be like, that's not my problem. UPS dropped it. But for me, I'm like, no questions asked. I'm like, immediately, I'll send you a new one. Do you need something else? Just being a human being and relating to people directly. I used to send out my corporate clients, obviously I would send their holiday gifts at Christmas time. And every year for Valentine's Day, I would send them something, just thanking them. It's these little things that no one else is doing that's going to make you stand out. And they seem so simple. Just asking a question or responding to an email, just acknowledging. People just want to be seen and heard and understood.
Jill, what I really love is that your parents were part of your success story, that they rooted you on, they were your cheerleaders. And we do that for our kids. And I think that matters. For all those parents out there or kids out there, it really does matter when you have that love and support for what you're doing. Jill, answer me this. Is there anything, any piece of wisdom or strategy that you wish you had known earlier on in your journey?
Oh my God. Well, if I had started my business now, would I be more successful? And in some ways, I think yes. In some ways, it's a lot easier to start a business now. There's so many things you can, like I said, you can create a website in a weekend by yourself. Like I had to pay someone a lot of money to code and to build a website from scratch and, learn about shipping. So I don't know. It's different. It's very different.
Times are different. So that's a very fair answer because I agree with you.
I followed every instinct that I had. When I started my business, people ask like, well, how could you leave a full-time job? And honestly, I was entry level in advertising. It wasn't that much that I was making. So I think that was easier. But also at the time, I didn't know that failure wasn't even an option. Like it didn't occur to me that it might not work. I didn't even think about it. Like to me, I had been doing this thing on the side. I was getting great feedback. And it just felt like by the time, my business, I think, was officially launched for a year before I left my full-time job. And at that time, to me, that was just the next step. Like I didn't even think about what I was doing.
So were you happy with everything that you did with Fretzels?
Overall, yes. Again, it's bittersweet. not having it, there's a lot that I miss. I had a lot of really great opportunities. I won a few awards, and one of those awards allowed me to fly to London and to be in Japan. So I got a lot of experiences. I met a ton of people. I learned so much that now helps me to help others.
So what's next for Jill?
I'm working that out right now. I'm in that space between over and next. So I am still open to a full-time opportunity that makes sense for me, whether that be in the food industry or building communities. So that's an area that I'm very passionate about. I am also in the process of launching 2 businesses. One is in the food industry, working with food entrepreneurs and launching online education and membership programs and helping food entrepreneurs to have a better shot at being successful. And then the other thing is more in the community space, which actually works really well with the topic we've been discussing with a former colleague of mine. We are launching a networking group for women who are in that space between over and next, who are not working. They're taking a break from their career, whether that was a chosen break where they plan to leave or an unchosen break where they were let go or fired or, company closed or something. I think it's hard when I closed Fretzels and when I left a full-time job a number of years ago. And even now I'm doing a number of things, and it's hard to understand who you are without thinking about what you do for a living. And I learned this many years ago. I was in Europe, I was in London, and I was at a party. I had a friend that lived there, and he took us, my friend and I, to a house party. And I remember meeting all these people, and I remember thinking, gosh, it's so weird. No one has asked me what I do for a living. And it occurred to me that only in the US, when you meet someone, are the first 2 questions, what's your name and what do you do? And I think that makes it so much harder for people. Like when I closed Fretzels, that's one of the reasons I went into this like dark place where I didn't talk to anyone, because I dreaded that question of what do you do?
Right,
Because I didn't want to answer, well, I used to be an entrepreneur and I used to be like a rock star and getting to travel and do these things and, work with celebrities and get in press and, all this stuff, to I don't do anything right now. And it's really hard. I struggle with it now. I think a lot of people struggle with it.
Sure.
If you don't have your career set and, what are you? Like, who are you?
Right.
So
Well, you're talking about identity, and I think that we all are on that journey of figuring that out. And there's no question. And something I often say is, I do believe we are stronger and better together.
yes.
I thank you so much, Jill, for sharing your story. It's relatable. It's relevant. It is, as much as things change, they don't change.
Yep.
People want to be seen and heard and want to accomplish great things. And we all should know that we can. We just have to figure out who we want to do that with and why we want to do it and where we want to do it. And then the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
This was great. I could go for some pretzels right now.
I know, me too.
They were
Maybe one day.
absolutely delicious. Well, thank you. Thank you. I
Well said.
love the beginnings and the birthing of brands. And I loved hearing Jill's story. I love that she created something just because she loved doing it. And it makes me think about our episode with Sue Monheit.
Yeah, taking a passion and a talent
To the next level.
and creating a business from it.
And I think that there are a lot of people out there, maybe you listening or watching, that was thinking, I don't want to do what I do every single day, 9 to 5 or whenever. And I really do want to follow my dream.
But let's be clear about this. If you're looking for a way to work less, to care less,
then this isn't for you.
this is not for you.
No. And you are
Right.
going to wear many, many hats. I mean, I was thinking about everything that Jill had to do and that we've done for our businesses, from concept to completion.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the idea of it and the design that goes behind it and all of the creativity that has to happen, but then also the technical components, at least in our world. And she had to talk about the manufacturing of what she was doing,
Right.
but how it looked, how it was received, how it felt, right? But you had to have practical business execution. So that includes the skills and talents that Jill has, and something that we are proud to have as well when it comes to branding, brand positioning, brand identity, graphic design, business development, product development, marketing strategy, digital marketing.
But the one thing to keep in mind with that is that her superpower was that she was versed in that aspect of marketing. Even in a space that was new to her in terms of the food world.
Well, coming from advertising, she already had a sensibility of how things should be,
Correct.
To look and feel, the branding. And then she also knew about the marketing. So you have the
Correct.
account side and you have the design side, and it all comes together and you're learning from each other. But she definitely had the foundation for that.
Yes. And what's important to remember is that we all have strengths. So if you're starting an entrepreneurial venture, don't be discouraged if you're only coming with one superpower, one strength. That's okay. You fill in the gaps. You learn. A true entrepreneur takes a big bite and then learns how to chew. You just have to be prepared for that kind of a ride. She could have been already an expert in creating chocolates, and then she'd have to learn the whole
The business
marketing
side.
and advertising
Right.
and getting the word out there, that whole side. So, we all bring a strength, we all have weaknesses,
Well, you have
and
to
in
tap
the
in.
end, you hope that they all balance each other out.
You have to tap into that. You do. You have to start becoming really hyper aware of your skill set and leverage it. And then surround yourself by others that do it well.
Right.
And
Fill
or
in the
better
gaps
than you.
with people around you. Never, ever, ever be the smartest person in the room.
Just make sure that you're working with people that are aligned with your values and your mission. I really appreciate Jill sharing her story. I feel that everybody has a unique place in this creative world that we live in, and that we can inspire you to be resourceful and versatile and accomplish whatever it is you want. And it can be profitable too.
I've said this many times. You don't let obstacles like if you think it can't be done, then it can't be done. Well, if that's the case, if you think it can be done, it can be done.
Well, it's belief. It's your belief system. So just put your eye on the prize and then have a plan and do it.
And be open to opportunity. Just like she was at the beginning when someone said, "Oh, these are so great. You could sell these." Right? And then it suddenly comes into her head and lo and behold, it becomes a reality because she was open to it. So be open to opportunities that may be coming your way and
Because endings
who
actually
knows?
are beginnings.
That's right. Absolutely. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to being together with you again soon. Thanks for tuning in to Between Over and Next. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it meaningful and insightful.
If you value it to be worthwhile, please share it with your friends and family.
We would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to write a review for us. Your feedback will help us continue to create content that resonates with you.
And don't forget, in the show notes, you can find all the relevant links mentioned in this episode, from accessing free downloads to visiting our website and more.
If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Simply send us an email. Our email address is hello@hollyandrobert.com. We're always excited to connect with our listeners.
So until next time, thank you again for joining us on Between Over and Next.
Thank you for listening to Between Over and Next, the podcast that navigates the twists and turns of life with courage, laughter, and a whole lot of inspiration. Tune in every Tuesday to hang out with Holly and Robert on your favorite podcast platform. Visit hollyandrobert.com and follow them on social media to ignite your passion and fuel your dreams.